So again, welcome everyone from lunch, and I just now realized that we haven't formally welcomed those who are joining us online. So we do want to welcome those of you who have joined us via virtual means, and hope you are finding yourselves engaged that way. So to kick off the afternoon session today, we have Professor Philip Ziegler sharing with us. And Philip is a professor of Christian dogmatics. And of course, we know what dogmatics does to resonance, so who knows where this will go. Professor of Christian dogmatics at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, of course. But Philip was raised in southwestern Ontario, Canada, so we will not get the Scottish brogue, so you won't sound all that intelligent, I guess, Philip, you know. At least that was what even those of us from Australia always thought, that people with the Scottish brogue had some sort of higher intelligence. But Philip was ordained to the order of Ministry of the United Church of Christ of Canada, and now serves as an associated elder of the Cathedral of the Church of St. Macher in Old Aberdeen. So, Philip, we're eager to hear your reflections. Some questions arising, theological musings on method, religion, and politics. Welcome, Philip. And I want to say, Philip has been very instrumental in helping us pull together this conference. So a special thank you to Philip. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, everyone, for coming back in the early afternoon slot. Glad to be here. The talk has the shape that you see on the screen here, just three simple sections. This is as many slides as I could manage. So you're in the hands of a Luddite this afternoon. My thanks, of course, to the organizers and the hosts of this event for the invitation to present alongside such a distinguished group of speakers. Though this talk comes late in the conversation, as it were, I hope that my few remarks will still be able to add something of value to the conversation about Professor Rosa's stimulating work and its theological reception. I'm also thrilled to be able to be the opening act for this afternoon's headline, so wait for that. The experience of reading Rosa for me, which happened closely this summer for the first time, was akin to an experience I had when I first read the work of René Girard. By which I mean this: it was the experience of coming face to face with the work of truly ambitious theory which, if not exactly like Girard's, hidden since the foundation of the world, was at least embarrassingly unknown to me. Theory which, if true, marshaled profound and analytical insight, and for that very reason, also great explanatory power. Theory whose author seemed also to be, in some sense, religiously musical. Rosa is clearly one of the great diagnosticians of our age. His is a widely appreciated and powerful account of the layered paradoxes of our personal, social, cultural, economic, and political existences under the conditions of late modernity. The world for which he accounts is a world that we readily recognize a world we readily recognize in his text, a manic carnival ride which we can neither stop nor get off. That frenetic standstill of which we've heard so much already. A world in which more and more happens, but guarantees and means less and less. The theory of social acceleration and of alienation is a theory with real explanatory power, touching on and accounting for our dysfunctional politics, our manifold social malaise, our economic captivity, and the depressive quality of our personal experience of, well, pretty much everything. As Imre Ketzers writes, everything keeps going on, but somehow flatter, if also more bluntly. Or I was thinking, as I was writing of the French novelist Michel Houellebecq's dry observation that even the catastrophic interruption of the COVID pandemic would change nothing. He said this: "We will not wake up after the lockdown in a new world. It will be the same, just a bit worse." Contemporary life in broken Britain, for those of us who enjoy it, is also a rather compelling daily case study of key aspects of Rosa's theory. And with his concept of resonance, Rosa also emerges as one of the great theoretical physicians of our era, prescribing a kind of phenomenological and existential therapy for our alienation, one that promises to hold together, if perhaps only in flashing moments of belonging and connection and meaning, and then perhaps in memory and hope of such moments, all that the spinning world is actively trying to break apart. And before all of this, both the diagnostic power and the therapeutic intervention, one stands amazed. I'm very grateful for what I've learned so far and for the chance to learn still more from this exchange. So, what follows is, as my title suggests, simply some brief theological reflections prompted by my recent reading and pondering of Rosa's work. I've tried to collect these reflections under three headings: method, religion, and politics. And I try as much as possible to formulate here questions in the hope of encouraging and sparking the kind of dialogue which we've already been enjoying. I want, in short, to take my first encounter with Rosa's work as a provocation and a fresh opportunity for a theologian to think again about some theological questions. So, with that, method, or what does Jena have to do with Jerusalem? So, social theory, as I see it, works to identify and to analyze our society's most powerful and salient features with a view to understanding better the dynamics which are shaping our shared human condition. With such heightened self-understanding, then comes the prospect of effective action and intervention to alter and hopefully to ameliorate the situation. By this kind of theoretically informed action, we change, or at least better navigate, our condition in ways that mitigate what's problematic and which aggravate what makes for human flourishing, or at least we hope. Such, it seems to me, is the nature and the aim of sociology as we meet it in Rosa's practice. So now we might ask my question: what has Jena have to do with Jerusalem? What does sociology and its aims have to do with theology and its aims? How do the business and the deliverances of the sociologist relate to those which properly preoccupy us as theologians, and how ought they to relate? Now, one influential answer sees the value of theology almost entirely cashed out in historical processes of social change and development, in which the Christian principle, as it were, is continually and necessarily compromised. That's how Troeltsch put it, in order to give practical shape to our contemporary social life. This continuous process of compromise is itself a socio-historical phenomenon and is liable for that reason to sociological and historical investigation without remainder. Schooled by important currents in modern thought, historicism, pluralism, theology here becomes a socio-historical discipline, taking as its task inquiry into the history of religious compromise in all of its geographical and cultural and social variation, before moving critically to assess whether inherited compromises continue to remain adequate to give expression to the depth dimension of our actual contemporary social life and problems. Theology here, on this score, is exclusively interested in the social function of doctrine, what doctrines do in and for social groups. Robinson and Kuhn have recently mounted a fresh case for just such an approach in an important study which advocates for what they call sociological theology. Sociology on this score both decisively shapes and, in a sense, also forms the horizon of theological work, now practiced as what we might consider a kind of religious social theory, which is to say, disciplined reflection on the specifically religious dimensions of social life, now undertaken with a view to shaping and reshaping that very same social life. The book by Robinson and Kuhn, by the way, is called Theology Compromised, Schleiermacher, Troeltsch, and the Possibility of a Sociological Theology, Fortress Press 2019. So one view of the matter. Of course, the intimate proximity and overlap of the sociological and the theological is also the starting point for John Milbank's now classic study, Theology and Social Theory. That book concedes from the outset that modern theology is rightly self-conscious of being, as John puts it, a contingent historical construct emerging from and reacting back upon particular social practices conjoined with particular semiotic and figural codings. But Rather than granting sociology the right to position theology in sociological terms, Milbank labors to position sociology in theological terms. And the result, as is well known, is a highly polemical account in which it is argued that secular scientific social theories are at best understood as themselves theologies, or as he puts it, anti-theologies in disguise, which is to say that they're competing meta-discourses invested with fully normative, if tacit, judgments about the is and the ought of reality. Secular social science, he continues, claims that there is a social vantage point from which it can locate and survey various religious phenomena. But in doing that, highly contestable assumptions about the nature of religions themselves help to define the perspective of this social vantage. Now, Milbank's arguments are complex and sprawling, but the upshot is to encourage the idea that theology and modern social theory are in fact competitors. Two discourses offering wide-ranging accounts of what's real, but whose implicit moral and ontological commitments are antithetical to one another. If this is so, then theology cannot allow itself to be, as he puts it, policed by the constraints and the deliverances of the social sciences. Neither can theology simply adopt the diagnoses and the proposed cures for social ills offered up by social theory as if they were self-evident truths, which it can and must own. Instead, in accord with the very logic of Christianity itself, Milbank thinks theology needs to exercise its own most fundamental claim to, as he puts it, read, criticize, and say what's going on in other human societies, interpreting them by comparing them with the new social practice arising from the social reality of Christ and his church. If you want the example of what that might look like in a text, Milbank directs us to Augustine's City of God. Here we have a paradigmatic kind of account of what Milbank has in mind, a theological redescription of Roman society whose most searching insights are won not in spite of Augustine's normative theological commitments, but precisely because of them. Now, we might consider both sociological theology, option 1, and theology as social theory, and social theory as theology, option 2, to be rather radical accounts, kind of overstatements, perhaps. And of course, between them, we find several intermediate models for conceiving of the interaction between sociology and theology. For present purposes, we might just consider 2. The first example is, as it were, homegrown, finding exemplary expression in the work of Deborah Van Dusen Hunsinger, previously of this parish, now emerita professor here at PTS. In Van Dusen Hunsinger's own work in pastoral counseling, the specific question concerns the interrelation of theology and psychology. But her account of this interdisciplinary relation is, I think, extensible to our case. It's a kind of strong analog. Instructed by Karl Barth's characteristic way of going about relating theological and non-theological discourse in his own work, Deborah winsomely conceives of a process of discerning what she calls analogical comparisons. Claims made in one discourse, say the sociological, should, in the first instance, not be conflated or confused with claims made in the other discourse, say theological. She explains it this way. She says, the logic and the scope of the claims that the two disciplines make about the nature of human reality are just not equivalent from one discipline to the next. Furthermore, the claims of the two disciplines are, she insists, necessarily rightly ordered or nested. As she explains, spiritual reality is more comprehensive than biological, emotional, interpersonal, social, and cultural reality. So there's a kind of ordering. Finally, theological and sociological perceptions cannot be separated or isolated from one another, as theology rightly needs to learn from other disciplines and needs them, as she explains, in order to address human life in all of its particularity. Indeed, the theologian should expect, as Barth himself counseled, to meet secular parables of the gospel in the world reflected in the true insights of other disciplines. In short, for Van Dusen Hunsinger, interdisciplinary engagement should run according to a Chalcedonian pattern. You may have already have espied that along the way, in which theology and sociology are neither confused with one another nor converted into one another, but rather stand related and ordered without separation or isolation in one effort to do justice to the realities of life. So in view here is not a stable once-for-all synthesis, but rather a kind of reflective pattern of interdisciplinary practice, which can be brought to bear time and again upon discrete kinds of cases. For another intermediate position, we might look to someone whose name you've already encountered in these last 2 days, and that is the French sociologist and theologian Jacques Ellul, who, as Rahel has already noted in her paper yesterday, embodied this question of the relation between the disciplines in his own person. Writing in the Christian century, he described his view of the matter, which he styled as a principle of confrontation, like this. He said, "We must seek the deepest possible sociological understanding of the world we live in, apply our best methods, refrain from tampering with the results of our research on the ground that they are spiritually embarrassing, maintain complete clarity and complete realism, all in order to find out, as precisely as may be, where we are, where we're going, and also what lines of action are actually open to us." So the first. Then the second pole is this. He says, at the same time, we must also develop and deepen our knowledge in the biblical and theological fields, but we must be aware of inflecting theology for the sake of the cultural. The only thing that will be of any use is not synthesis or adaptation, he continues, but confrontation. That is, bringing face to face two factors that are contradictory and irreconcilable and at the same time inseparable. For it is only out of the decision that one makes when one experiences this contradiction that the Christian will arrive at a practical position. So, Christian intellectual responsibility on this score entails the effort of inhabiting this kind of dialectical tension in which sociological claims and theological claims coexist and confront one another, because the realities of which they speak subsist without eliminating each other. Ellul's preferred metaphor for the relation of the two disciplines is counterpoint. Interestingly, a musical metaphor, not unlike resonance. Counterpoint, suggesting that the simultaneity and the juxtaposition of independent lines, which may move between, at times, harmony and at times, disharmony. Such a counterpoint can, of course, only be played through, which is to say, what comes from the confrontation between the two lines, theological and the sociological, cannot be resolved in advance or abstractly in thought. It can only be processed in life. So in life, in decision, and in concrete risk of action. Now, with this rough typology in hand, then we can return to our question. What has Jena to do with Jerusalem? First and foremost, I want to suggest that we need simply to acknowledge that there is no single self-evident way in which theology can and should receive or engage Rosa's social theory. Its salience and its status vis-a-vis Christian theology is open, as we've noted, to several quite different material judgments and correspondingly different methodological approaches. However we proceed, important decisions of a material theological kind are already at play in deciding the very manner of our engagement, and that's a point that I want to stress. Right? Our imagination of what theology is, what it does, what it's for, are all involved and at stake here already. Much will turn upon judgments of the proper subject matter of theological inquiry. What do we think we're talking about? And the tasks which rightly follow from those judgments. We have to think upon these and be ready to give an account of the whys and the wherefores of our practice in whatever line we might proceed. Our lively encounter with Rosa's thought is a good opportunity to revisit these kinds of matters with renewed care and attention. Second, this rough typology might also give us some ways of beginning to analyze and to appreciate the kind of theological reception that Rosa's thought is already begun to receive. Take, for example, Andrew Root's engagement with the theories of social acceleration and resonance in his well-known books, The Congregation in a Secular Age, Churches and the Crisis of Decline. Root himself draws out an interesting parallel with Dietrich Bonhoeffer's Sanctorum Communio, written in the late 1920s, which attempted, as Bonhoeffer called it, a theological sociology of the church. Now, Root invites us to imagine what it might look like if Bonhoeffer were to write that book today, and in doing so would draw on Rosa, rather than, say, Simmel and Tönnies for his sociological conversation partners. Bonhoeffer himself eschewed the more normatively thick claims of Weberian sociology when he wrote in the 1920s in favor of this rather more formal and what he considered normatively thin theories of simul and tunis. And so I wonder, ought we to think of Rosa's work as similarly formal and thin in this way? Is that part of what recommends it to us? It's formality. Rosa himself stresses at points that his key concepts of alienation and resonance are to be understood, as he puts it, in non-essentialist ways, being left entirely open as to content, and so able to be filled out in, as he puts it, all manner of historically and culturally different, and we might also add theologically distinctive ways. I think Root's own appeal to Rosa's work here takes these kinds of claims to formality seriously and has proceeded accordingly. He receives Rosa's work as a kind of middle discourse, a kind of wisdom literature of largely formal claims about the actualities of our world. The theologian then discerns the aptness of those forms and, espying all manner of possible overlaps, dare one say even resonance, with the claims and insights of the Christian faith itself, is then able to go on to fill out the forms with specifically Christian content accordingly. I was thinking of an example from the exchange we've had so far, right? The idea that the world is communicative, speaks to us, calls to us, right? Root's reception of that hears in that a kind of incipient theology of the word, right? So you can substantiate the idea with Christian content because the form is, in this instance, congenial. Right? But it's the formality of the form that makes that possible. Thus, the theologian takes up as much of Rosa's sociology as is possible and does so with gratitude and integrates its insights into the warp and the weft of his or her own program. Yet, each of the positions on our rough typology, all in their own way, accede, or at least assert, that sociological theories are never quite as formal as we think they are. And they do, in fact, traffic in all manner of thick normative claims in both their diagnostic and their therapeutic aspects. They reckon not only with what human being is, but also, in some sense, always what it ought to be. Not just what society is and does, but what it ought to be and do. They're never quite as open and underdetermined as they might seem. If this is so, then theologians, besides being just grateful and receptive, will also, of course, need to be critical in one way or another, scrutinizing the operative norms at work in the forms of sociological analysis and description, as those norms will, in effect, bear on all manner of material Christian claims. Claims concerning, for example, the nature of Christian community, theological anthropology, our understanding of the quality of time, eternity, creaturely ends, the question of human suffering, the problem of sin, and so on. We can and must ask of any given reception of Rosa's work into the theological programs just how it takes responsibility for this necessary critical moment and the consequences of doing that. As I say, just a question, right? Every time Rosa's work is taken up, one of the things we should think about is what kind of way is this critical responsibility being prosecuted here? How is it being done? So that's my second point. Finally, and last in this section, I think we can and should also ask the sociologists in our midst what they make of these types of possible interdisciplinary relation, which I've sketched, which of course are all fashioned from a theological perspective. How might the sociologists want to construe the relationship between the two disciplines from their sociological perspectives, and why? And what might we make of their answers theologically? Well, that's a question I'm keen for us to chew on in what follows. Now, I've labored this first question of interdisciplinary method perhaps more than anyone in this room would have liked, but I hope not without interest. My two remaining questions can now be formulated more quickly and concisely. And so with that, on to number 2, religion. I mentioned at the outset that Rosa struck me as a religiously musical theorist. The contrast there is with Richard Rorty, who famously described himself as religiously unmusical. Not only does his work consider religion something to be integrated into social theory, taking an interest in the question of what sort of relationship to the world arises from or within religious practices, but elements of the theory itself, perhaps most strikingly the idea of resonance itself, also have strong religious overtones. These features suggest that Rosa is a thinker friendly to religion, and perhaps also for that reason to religious reflection. It's nice for a theologian to encounter a critical theory which isn't immediately and aggressively out to get me. So think for a moment, if you will, of this rather winsome religion-like characterization of resonance. This is from on page 188 of the English edition. Rosa writes there, "At the root of resonant experience lies the shout of the unreconciled and the pain of the alienated. At its center is not the denial or repression of that which resists us, but the momentary, only vaguely perceptible certainty of a transcending nevertheless." Now, striking in the first part of that proposition as I read it, at the root of resonant experience lies the shout of the unreconciled and the pain of the alienated, is of course its echo of the opening of Marx's own famous definition of religion, which we could say together, but I'll read it for you. Religious distress, Marx writes, is at the same time the expression of real distress and also the protest against real distress. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, just as it is the spirit of spiritless conditions. Resonant experience lies the shout of the unreconciled and the pain of the alienated. You can hear the parallel. Now, Marx, of course, famously continues to criticize religion, writing this. Again, you could say it, but let me read it for you. It's the opium of the people. To sublate religion as the illusory happiness of the people is to demand their real happiness. The demand to give up illusions about the existing state of affairs is the demand to give up a state of affairs which needs illusions. The criticism of religion is therefore in embryo the criticism of the veil of tears, the halo of which is religion. Now, by contrast, Rosa goes on in the second part of his own proposition to characterize resonance not in terms of illusion, repression, and false consciousness, but rather as an authentic experience of affirmation, a glimpsing and grasping of a certain hope amidst alienation, a hope that things can indeed be otherwise for us. Indeed, a kind of disposition to such hope is ingredient in the very possibility of resonant expression itself. We've had this raised at several points in the conversation so far. Rosa explains it this way. He writes, creative transformation can only succeed on the basis of a fundamental faith in resonance, which is to say, just within the positive expectation that reality has something meaningful to say to us. So, creative transformation can only succeed on the basis of a fundamental faith in resonance, which is to say, the positive expectation that reality has something meaningful to say to us. Resonant experience has as its condition of possibility, as it were, our being disposed towards the world as a kind of legible text addressed to us. We might say that the fundamental kind of hermeneutical posture here is one of trust and expectation, then, rather than, say, suspicion. The positive venture of the kind of faith that, for example, Karl Rahner styled as our fundamental option, which is to say, a primal and categorical act of human self-realization, which is also a transcendental human response to God's implicit offer of grace. Yet, I asked myself, as I reflected on this, just what understanding of religion itself runs within Rosa's theorizing. It's one thing to note the religious-ish kind of character of the idea of resonance, but what about religion as a topic in Rosa's own work? Of course, in his very recent book, which others have spoken about, Democracy Needs Religion, religion appears as an arena of human social life, which is possessed of potentially invaluable resources for thinking about and relating to the world, otherwise than in the aggressive, growth-oriented, controlling manner demanded by late modern existence. Religious spaces, calendars, and rituals elicit dispositions of patience from us. Its intentional forms of embodied community life, at their best, are precisely fashioned to cultivate non-instrumentalizing relationships, resonant human encounters. Religious ideas about the source and the shape and the ends of reality fund, as he says, a feeling that there's a sort of promise of resonance from on high. His words, a promise that runs, again, to quote him, what lies at the heart of my existence is not the silent, cold, hostile, or indifferent universe, but rather a responsive relation with a reciprocating world, a relation that invites and involves me and you, and so a relation that personalizes us rather than depersonalizes us. In short, as Rosa explains, religion has the power to unlock a sense of what it might mean to be called, to be transformed, and so to live in a state of resonance. Now, we learn more from the short and dense discussion of religion as a vertical axis of of resonance in the resonance book itself. As an axis of resonance, religion there is a form of relation established and stabilized between the subject and a particular segment of the world that makes possible, as he explains, the recurrence or repetition of such experiences resonance. It represents a kind of traditioned region of human being in the world, which cultivates an expectant patience, kind of this disposition we need, a patience, which is to say, a posture of openness and expectation of the possibility of the advent of resonant experience, though of course never able to guarantee it by any particular technique or practice. Rosa defines religion here as the idea expressed through rites, practices, songs and stories, art and architecture, that the something which we encounter at the base of all of our being in the world is responsive, accommodating, and understanding. And God, he observes, particularly an exciting sentence for a theologian, God, he observes, is at bottom the notion of a responsive world, a world that touches us and is able to be addressed and to respond to us. Now, the Schleiermacher of the speeches and the Buber of I and Thou, as we heard this morning, are the particular patrons of this account of religion, but so too is William James and his analysis of the varieties of religious experience. The approach to religion is, as one might expect, phenomenological, and so agnostic as to truth, being interested rather in the social and psychological functions of religion. Such a functional approach allows Rosa to suggest that even irreligious moderns can find equivalent kinds of vertical value in encounters with the, as he puts it, the commands of nature, the demands of art, and the dictates of history, which is to say that non-religious moderns can find resonance in experiences of these dimensions of life, nature, art, history, as ones which speak or call out to us and invite us into meaningful relationships as responsive agents in an eloquent world in which we feel we properly belong. In view, in short, I think, are a positive assessment of the drives and the dreams of the homo religiosus, the religious human being, and the value of some manner of religious reenchantment of the world as our proper human dwelling in the fight against the alienations of our time. Now, theologians may find all this very welcome and encouraging. Here is a powerful socio-theoretical affirmation of the positive value of our religious natures, which recommends the crucial humane possibilities of inherited religious practices, spaces, and communities. The suggestion that religion is a friend and not, as modernity itself has often rather aggressively held, a foe of human flourishing, will be music to the ears of many a pastor and a theologian. And yet we may have questions. Let me raise just two. First, we may think we need to reckon with Rosa's honest affirmation that, as he puts it, the sociology of our relationship to the world can remain agnostic, thus staying compatible with both realistic and constructivist, and in extreme cases, even solipsistic positions. It does not matter, he continues, how we might conceive of a reality independent of the subject experiencing it. What matters is only how we are related to it and situated in the world. Just the social and psychological function of religion and not its truth value, or I think perhaps better, its function taken as truth value, is sociologically salient here. Whether or not the universe really is responsive and accommodating and understanding, whether or not there really is something that calls and hears us is neither finally perhaps here or there. For religion's power to function as a vertical axis of resonance, which is to say its power to affirm and to seat us meaningfully in the world, is a matter of social experience and subjectivity. And so it can be embraced even, and perhaps even consciously, as a useful illusion, or even as a useful illusion. Theologian will, I suspect, see more to be at stake here in the question of religious truth, and find something important in discerning between true and false religion, between life lived in accord with reality and life succored by useful illusion. Theology will at least need to think about how this concern with the truth of religion might affect its alliance and its trade with the sociological recommendation of religion as a vehicle of resonance. It sounds a bit grumpy, sorry. Now, others, this gets grumpier yet, especially those who treasure the now entirely unfashionable theological critique of religion advanced by some Protestant strains of theology in the last century may have yet another question to ask. We can motivate this question from a number of sources, from Barth, from Bonhoeffer, from Gabriel Bahanian, from Hans Joachim Krauss, among others. But allow me to stick with our Frenchman, Jacques Ellul, who put the matter rather sharply like this. Religion, he wrote, also serves to encourage us to live. It's not easy to live. We need to be encouraged and helped. And all of this is purely sociological, purely psychological, purely natural. Religion at this level, of course, has no sort of necessary reference to God. A truly transcendent God, for example, the God revealed in the Bible, does not in any way correspond to our spontaneous religious feelings, he said. Now, the theological critique of religion begins by considering the possibility, en route to discerning the necessity, of distinguishing the living God from the manifold mainsprings of human religion, and so also differentiating religious feeling, piety, and practice from Christian faith and its obedience. It requires us to ask whether the depth dimensions of our experiences of the world really can and ought to be identified straightforwardly and without thought as experiences of the God of the gospel. Once we find ourselves moved to entertain the possibility of the non-identity of God and the responsive world of faith and religion, then other questions follow in turn. Because then we have to press on to clarify more precisely just what it is, just what is the character of the church's stake in the battle between alienation and resonance. Can there be, I wonder, a Christian faith in our age without the re-enchantment of worldly experience, which seems to be integral to the pursuit of resonance along its vertical axis? Is the pursuit of resonant experience in and of the world to be taken to be straightforwardly identical with the business of faith? Is faith arising from an event of divine revelation in Christ or the movement of the Holy Spirit, as we might say theologically, a species of the genus resonance? Can the life of faith be exhaustively redescribed in the language of resonance without remainder? Or is there something other, something more different at issue here? The asking and answering of such questions seems to me ingredient in any responsible theological reception of the concept of resonance and the kind of ideas of religion which are entangled with it. We could come at this same problem from another angle. We could ask whether Christian faith can accompany and embrace not only resonant life and experiences, but also alienated life and experiences. Can faith be a dimension of our lives not only when they resonate with the world, and also and especially when they don't? Faith may indeed keep company with the sublime, but perhaps it also keeps company with the ridiculous and the banal. Indeed, I wonder whether Christian faith and life don't in fact involve its own kind of holy alienation, we might say, a kind of unsettling of our place in the world, which induces a salutary tension between our being at home in this world, the present age, and our being seized by another coming world, another coming age. Is there a Christian alienation from the world, a faithful alienation from the world, one proper to faith and itself an expression of faith's strong evaluation of things, which is non-identical with the alienation produced by the stabilizing dynamics of late modernity, but which also sits sideways to the pursuit and the valorization of resonance and resonant experience as affirmations of our love of the world as it is? To put it rather piously, if I may, does not the New Testament antinomy between flesh and spirit map onto, or does it cut across, that between alienation and resonance? If the latter holds true, if the difference between flesh and spirit cuts across the difference between resonance and alienation, then the business of alienation and its overcoming by resonance would fall firmly within the sphere of what Bonhoeffer called the penultimate. Matters of this kind are not nothing, to be sure. Remembering that, as Ellul said, religion is one of those things which serves to encourage us to live because it's not easy to live, and we need to be encouraged and helped. Penultimate matters, as Bonhoeffer conceived them, certainly have their own proper import. Perhaps they even serve to, as he put it, prepare the way for the coming of the gospel, for ultimate matters. But those matters themselves are not ultimate. They are not ultimate matters. And they can be meaningfully distinguished from the soteriological concerns that are properly at the heart of Christian faith and life as such. So I wonder whether a non-religious Christianity, or if you'd rather, a religion critical theology, would be able to take up at least some of the same, if not greater interest in the resonant potential and the quality of secular experiences, like those that Rosa himself mentions, nature, art, and history, just as much as it takes an interest in religion. Can we do resonance without re-enchantment? I ask. To a silent room. Okay, part 3. We're almost there. Finally, and most briefly, something about politics. The former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown has dubbed our time a time of permacrisis. Rosa's theorizing is quite directly interested in the origins and the dynamics of this state of permacrisis. In fact, he sees our received patterns and practices of political life to be dissolving around us in the acids of contemporary acceleration and alienation. And reading him, we can readily come to see it too. Is it even conceivable, we might worry, to resynchronize political life and institutions with our accelerated and still accelerating technologies, economies, societies, and all the alienation that they engender? Perhaps politics must always now be too slow, always be outpaced by events. Perhaps politics must always come on the scene too late. And so for just that reason, can never serve the kind of programmatic shaper of life that it did during the particularly temporalized times of earlier phases of modernity. Indeed, Rosa has argued that detemporalization of history is the context of late modern politics, and that context leaves us stuck. It leaves us stuck and alienated amidst the unordered sequences of what he calls a neo-static simultaneity and situational politics. So we might ask, do the essential dynamics of our society make impossible the practices of our politics? Is democracy even possible at the present pace? Or, if you'd rather, we might ask just what are or might be the politics of resonance. Not slow politics, akin to slow food, it seems. Rosa himself has long since eschewed the simple counsel that we should just slow down as the solution to our speed-induced political alienation. So if not slow politics, what then? Is the pursuit of resonance along all of its axes itself to be understood as a kind of political activity? Does the experience of resonant life, by its nature, fund any particular kind of politics? Is resonance, for example, a driver of reform? Is it a driver of resistance? Is it a funder of resignation? Or, dare we say, with Lord Byron of the 19th century, a driver of revolution? One line of reflection on display in Does Democracy Need Religion is to ask about whether our politics needs to be supported by resonant experiences in cultural spaces, which, while themselves not directly political, like religion, nevertheless fit us, as it were, for political life. Perhaps we need citizens who learn again to feel truly at home in the world, citizens who are invested variously in the forms of community life which constitute the horizontal axes of resonance, and thus formed in relations of exchange in which they learn, as we were thinking this morning, how to listen with open ears, and so to speak in turn without violence. Rosa's thinking might lead us to ask again a question that Jeffrey Stout has long been putting to us, namely, what kind of virtues do we have to cultivate, or what kind of people do we have to become in order to be fit for democracy? Which is to say, what kind of people do we have to become if we're to commit ourselves in good faith to the democratic discipline of deliberation, taking time to give and to ask for honest reasons from one another in public debate? Perhaps there's a kind of account of resonant citizenship to be had here. Another line of reflection, though, might focus on Rosa's suggestion that the political problem of our age is specifically the problem of post-histoire, as he says, the end of history, the time of frenetic standstill. As he writes, the political problem of this moment is not the end of the world, but the end of meaning. Not the end of the world, but the end of meaning. On this read of things, a cultural politics of meaning is what's in order, a therapeutic kind of politics which, by way of the pursuit and achievement of resonance, can infuse the political world with meaning once again and make our experience of time historical again. But is the problem of our moment, I wonder, actually the onset of the end of history, the end of meaning? Or is the malaise of our moment to be best understood uh, not as the loss of meaning, which is to say a problem of superstructure, but rather as an epiphenomenon of the destruction of the base conditions of our existence itself? The base conditions of our existence by the relentless consumption demanded by ever grander and more encompassing processes of economic and political dynamic stabilization. What if the real political cost of late modern social acceleration is not chiefly the problem of alienation, not just the forfeiture of meaning, but is in fact the threat posed to life itself, the ruin of the very material conditions of possibility of human and indeed of all other life as such? I wonder if the emergent monsters of uncontrollability, which have been mentioned in this room in previous days, include a kind of threat not just to meaningful life, but to life itself, in which meaning, if it's to be had, has to subsist. In my more pessimistic moments, as the long Scottish nights start to draw in, I I worry. I I worry that any resonant politics that we might achieve might merely assuage our symptoms without disrupting our elemental disease. I worry that any politics of resonance would simply be, in the lyrics of one of Professor Rosa's favorite bands, welcomed to the machine, which is to say, reincorporated into the spinning top of late modernity, so that whatever meaning and transformation they might seem to offer would inevitably be commodified and instrumentalized and consumed as just yet one more resource, just more valuable political and cultural capital in the continuing war of all against all by other means. It's dark in Scotland, as you can tell. Can there really be any future without an economic and correlated political and social deceleration on scale and perhaps, ironically, at pace? I worry that we might resonate while the world burns, knowing as it does that at least it was meaningful while it lasted. Rosa himself has suggested that Frederick Jameson's astonishment at the fact that late modern society can more easily imagine the end of the world than an end to the liberal capitalist political system can in fact be explained by his theory of social acceleration. And I'm sure that that's true. That diagnosis and its explanation seem to me invaluable. But I wonder if resonance is and can be the source of the kind of seemingly urgent politics we need to arrest the machine. Is resonance really the right spanner we need in our hands if we want to jam up the works? I can see how a resonant recollection of the earth as our place of poetic dwelling, for example, to think of Heidegger, might aid in this, might dispose us in a certain kind of way. But I can also see how the cultivation of something akin to what Jakob Taubes called his own spiritual disinvestment in this world as it is might also, and perhaps even more radically, fund the kind of politics that the crisis of our time demands. So I wonder, maybe we really do need something like the messianic arrest of all happening that Walter Benjamin aspies. Perhaps first at the level of the community register as a provocation and an invitation to our wider political world. Right, so to conclude, well, time is almost up. If there's one question and concern that holds together these few observations and questions arising from my encounter with Rosa's important and timeless social theory, it might be this. How does the eschatological advent that gives Christian theology its origin, its source, its heart, its horizon, how does that event dispose theology and theologians to engage and to appreciate and to learn from social analysis like this? What does Rosa's science of our experience of the loss and lack of time have to do with our science of the fullness of time? What does acceleration have to do with the apocalypse of God in Jesus Christ? Matters of method and religion and politics, I've tried to suggest, just three among many, are implicated in the kinds of answers we would give to these questions. Rosa himself once wrote that in relation to our rabid pursuit of a fulfilled life, acceleration, as he says, as a strategy of aligning world time and lifetime has become a secular substitute for eternity, a functional equivalent for religious ideas of eternal life, and thus a modern response to death. And so, in a kind of turn of irony, turns out to be the primary external impulse for the heightening of the pace of life itself. But I wonder when the temporalizing of time, which we've been reflecting on here, puts paid to this modern proxy for eternity, what then? Well, perhaps then there's scope for a new encounter with the strange qualification of time with which Christian theology must continually reckon. For the urgency of the eschatological qualification of finite time brings with it judgment and redemption. Eschatology lends both urgency and ultimate meaning to time. Social acceleration lends only urgency. At the end of the eschatological judgment and redemption of time, of course, is the gift of Sabbath rest, the advent of a quality of time which can never be produced, at pace or otherwise, but only ever received. The cultural memory of something like this seems to me to be the animating impulse of Rosa's imaginative discernment, that in the phenomena of resonant experience, something akin to grace is afoot, something uncontrollable, an uncontrollable gift addressed and given to us as a salutary blessing from beyond. Once again, let me say how grateful I am for the opportunity to have tried to formulate these few questions of mine in the context of this event and the rich conversation which we're enjoying so far. And no doubt those gathered here who know Rosa's work well, not least the man himself, will put me straight. And I look forward to being schooled, and I'm grateful to you for your attention. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Philip, for those stimulating questions. Brings to this eschatological moment. I think I'm just going to invite you, Hartmut, to take up at least one of those questions.
Of course, I'd like to answer them all. No, I find that they're very interesting and very challenging also, and very inspiring. And of course, when I was criticizing dogmatism, I did not mean your discipline, right?
You should feel free to criticize our discipline.
No, when it comes to the truth question, I mean, that's really quite interesting. I'll say something on this, but let me start with the first. What's the relationship between sociology and theology? That's what you started with, the method, and I found that very interesting, right? And I thought in the last, I think it's the second last book I've written with Andreas Reckwitz, I tried to kind of formulate it a bit more, right? I mean, there I'm strongly influenced. There too, in many other respects too, by Charles Taylor, right? And actually, you know what, the thing that got me to Taylor was really his self-interpreting animals or self-interpretation in the sciences of man. So I completely take it from him, and also Hubert Dreyfus and others. Human beings are self-interpreting animals. I mean, that's a starting point which you probably maybe would not share, but to some extent, right? So we are self-interpreting animals, and that means we need to make sense of our condition, our human condition, and our late modern condition, our cultural and historical point, right? So I think this is really true, right? And it's not just we are something and then we interpret it, but our interpretation is really kind of constitutive of who we are, right? I mean, so the society we live in does depend on our understanding of the society we have. And now the question is, how do we do the self-interpretation? And I think we never do it simply solipsistically, right? Because we speak a language, and this is something we share, and we participate in practices which shape our self-interpretations. But then, of course, we do it also reflectively. So, and this is Taylor's last book, right? It's very much about poetry. He says poetry is a part of the self-interpretation. But for me, it's pretty obvious that in our late modern society, social sciences have a strong voice in it, right? And this is why I'm so sorry about sociology no longer trying to do it, right? I mean, they are particularly in the US, they're no longer doing grand theory, right? I mean, they do kind of particular empirical statistical context, but then it's others like Harari or so, right, who give us explanations of who we are and where we are. But in my understanding, it's part of what we should do as sociologists, try to give an interpretation of who are we right now, what's our situation, and that includes normative aspects. Where do we want to go? What's the problems we're having? But it's clear for me that theology also has a say and a role to play, right? In Taylor, which I which I take up in the book with Reckwitz, I say in the end, the task is to come up with the best account. That's also a Taylorian concept, right? So we should try to make the best possible account of our situation. And I think this is what I do as a sociologist and what you do as a theologian, I would say, right?
Mhm.
But then we have to enter into discourse, right? And this is exactly what we do here, right? So, so when I look at the world in our condition, this is my interpretation, and then you might come up with another interpretation, and then we open it up dialogically, right? And we probably will never. I think it's an eternal business, right? We will never finish at the interpretation, but therefore I don't see it as as completely operating on separate levels, right? I really think we are all trying to contribute to the best account of late modern society. I mean, could religion just be a necessary illusion? I mean, it's really true that I don't. In terms of content, I really shy away, and actually, I think I would almost say there is no truth, right? I think you could not say God is this or God says that. I mean, that's something I would not share personally, right? But it would not be enough to say, oh, we live quite well if we believe in a God, so it doesn't matter whether he's there, or even we say it's just a necessary illusion or a useful illusion. That wouldn't work. Because I mean, there again, Charles Taylor saves everything. I mean, for me, the concept of strong evaluation is very important, right? You can only get in resonance with something which you experience as something of importance in itself. I mean, for me, the difference between weak and strong evaluations is weak evaluation is something is useful for me, or I like it. So the source of value is me, right? So if religion was just an illusion, I would say, there might be no God or there is no God, but it's useful if I believe in him, so I believe in him. That would not work, because then it's not a source of strong evaluation, right? Strong evaluation is the idea there is something out there which really is important, right? But I think so I think as a sociologist, or the concept of resonance requires this experience, this sense there is something, I would call it transcendence. There is some transcendent power or source which speaks to me and which has meaning. But I think this source will always be also part of the interpretation, right? So there could not be a truth, I believe, right? I mean, as a sociologist and even as a human being, I do not think, no offense, right? The Bible is the word of God, and that's the right thing, and all the Hindus and the Muslims, and they all get it wrong, and only we get it right. I mean, this is something I would not share. Right? On the politics, I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, I agree with I completely understand the point, right? I think many sociologists would hold that against me too, right? Or not just sociologists, they think resonance. Oh yeah, let's do a bit poetry and go to the forests also, right? While we still burn and destroy the world, right? But I think I would say that's completely wrong, right? It's not just an individual subjective thing. Whether we can have a resonant life depends on institutions, on social relations. So the question is, how do we change them, because they are disastrous? It seems to me that we agree on this, right? But I think I almost have a strong new feeling, right? I mean, the critical theory tradition, and for almost now centuries, for me it starts with Marx, for example, right? I think we have been pretty good at criticizing society, right? At saying there's something wrong here. And even with the first generation critical theorists, I would go along to say our whole form of existence is screwed. So I think it's easy, and I can easily convince people that's all wrong, right? Capitalism is a problem, acceleration is a problem, environmental destruction is a problem, sexism is a problem, colonialism is a problem. It is. Racism is awful. But I think that's what sociology does all the time, right? It says, oh, here we are racist, here we are sexist, here we are colonialist, here we are. And nothing changes for centuries. We keep going on the same path. So now I really, frequently I quote Leonard Cohen in the anthem. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So I really now think, and my students hate it, at least part of them. I want to go for an affirmative revolution, which means I'm not all the time criticizing, oh, this is wrong and that is wrong. Let's rather go for, oh, this is a moment of resonance, right? How did it come about? How can we enlarge it? How can we draw the conclusions and the implications from this, right? Like in academic institutions, I mean, I think this could be an example, at least for me, right? There are so many boring academic institutions where you and conferences and discussions where you think it's wrong, right? But sometimes in teaching or in conferences or so, there is a moment of it's working here, right? So I think we should dwell on this, start taking it. I really think let's concentrate on those moments in schools, in universities, in hospitals, in our interaction with animals, where we have the sense there is some resonance at work here. And then let's ask, why don't we have it all the time? Or why is it so rare? And then start to kind of revolutionize our form of life from there, right? So my claim for this is, let's go for an affirmative revolution. All right. Maybe we can form an allegiance on this.
Sign it up.
Are there any particular thoughts or questions? I mean, Wes, go ahead.
Thank you. Oh, this is extraordinary. Man. What a great, I think, having this toward the end. Mr. Ziegler, I'm sort of struck by your desire to ask if there is an affirmative alienation, if religious experience of revelation cracks as well as heals. And I'm wondering if there is the distinction that Paul Rapport makes between proclamation and manifestation.
Yeah.
If there is not a necessary trajectory of religious experience, which is not consistent with, or not reconcilable with, a manifestation of the whole that is in fact an alienation of the whole, which is necessary to religious experience. And I'd like to ask you to sort of speak a little more about that.
Yeah, that recur essay, I love that recur essay. Yeah, it's one way of sort of describing this disjunction of in the language of the paper, religion, faith. Yeah, and I am genuinely interested about the idea that there are fundamental features of Christian faith, belief and practice which properly unseat us, kind of discomfort our being in the world, and that discomfiture is ingredient in faith, and to the extent that an account of religion trades on sort of strong and uninterrupted investments in affirming our being in the world as a kind of unmitigated good, I guess I just kind of think, well, maybe not finally, or that might be true, but that only goes to prove that the meaning and business of religion is not in an exhaustive overlap with the meaning and business of faith, and that the distinction between faith and religion, one of the ways to open that up is this notion, the language of alienation, which you use, was just an occasion to think about it, right? That there is there is a kind of setting apart, a kind of discomfiture, a kind of unseating, a kind of kind of aliens, right? You think about the language of resident aliens, a book that people may have read in this room. That there's something to that, right? In the longer tradition, you could think about certain kinds of asceticism, which are expressions of a certain kind of sidewaysness.
Sort of becomes a disposition in a way.
Yeah, you could work it out as a kind of series of spiritual practices and dispositions. You could work it out kind of theologically in the kind of distinction between, say, faith and religion. I was working. Yeah. And I guess the main thing that I wanted that I'd be interested to think about further myself is if you think there's something in that distinction, what would it mean for there to be a kind of embrace of a kind of alienated embrace of alienated life, right? Or to even take the view that it's at least not any less proper for faith to keep company with alienated life, in Rosa's terms, than it is for faith to seek to keep company with resonant life, right? That Christian faith and practice belongs in this struggle as much as it belongs in this sublime experience and positivity. This negativity is not alien to us as believers. It's not alien to us. Maybe, but yeah. In the first instance, I guess you could think of it as a question of the shape of discipleship, even, right? Or you could I can imagine a kind of account, a kind of ecclesiological account that would dispose the church to think that perhaps dwelling in and confrontation with human alienation is its more native and proper ground than the chasing, if I can put it polemically for a second, the chasing of resonant experiences. Right? It might be more proper for us to dwell in the wreckage of late modernity with those who are the victims of that wreckage, including ourselves, because our hope is not in, again, just to say it polemically, sorry, we don't hope in resonance. We've got our faith hopes in something else. So resonance and alienation are both two modes of being in the world which Christian faith may or may not be able to engage and occupy. And we wouldn't. I guess the question that I want that occurred to me as I was reading the work was why would Christian faith think we ought to spend more time trying to get our faith and practice aligned with resonance rather than with a kind of difficult indwelling in the midst of alienation. I just was able to formulate that as a question. I have an intuition there's something important in there, and that recur essay to come back, articulates what might be the ground of it. But sorry, yeah.
I mean, maybe I don't even quite understand the theological implications of that discussions, right? But it seems to me to be very important. And my starting point was a bit actually with William James, for example, or Schleiermacher, right? That there are two human forms of experiencing the world, and I actually think we all know them. The one is what I call the Camus or the Nietzsche experience of the utterly silent, hostile universe, right? And that's for me kind of alienation. But I think it's and the other is the welcoming, the resonant universe. But those are two realities. But most of the time, I actually say, right, we live in an alienated world, and sometimes it's utterly alienated. And this is why I liked John's. I think is he still here? Yeah. About this. The resonant theory of the cross, right? The cross is the moment of utter alienation, and then for me, what faith, in my understanding, what faith does is it's a yet, right? I feel utterly, I only experience the silent, dead universe. Yet, at least there is the scream, and even in the scream, right, there is this hope for you don't let go of the idea that there is a kind of resonant relationship, right? Mm-hmm. So would you? Yeah.
So just to take the same setup, in the midst of that Sartre, Camus, Nietzschean alienation,
yes,
the silent world, I would think faith, as you put it, kind of cries out for hope.
Yes,
but I'm not sure that I would want theologically to identify the object of that hope as resonant experience. I think it might be something else.
Go beyond it.
It might be a third thing, which perhaps is sociologically not something that can be, but which theologically I feel obliged.
There is no third thing.
There is no third thing. Yeah.
I mean,
but it's very interesting.
I just wonder.
Could one could one be in an alienated experience of the world and at peace with Christ?
I would hope so. I would hope, in fact, that peace with Christ might mean a certain kind of alienation. And it might mean being alienated from our alienation in Rosa's sense, but it would also mean being alienated from our resonance in a certain sense. That, I guess, is the thing that opening up that possibility is the one I want to open. Yeah, that we could be rightly alienated by faith, not just from alienation, but also from resonance, and that would be salutary and not bad, if I can put it like that. Sorry, that bad technical term there.
Andy.
Just to build on this, just one more step, because I think it's a really interesting distinction here in a lot of theological. I'm thinking back to the painting we had of the cross of Grenville.
Right.
And we always focus on Bart and John the Baptist. But there's a whole nother side to that painting. Where the beloved disciple is comforting the mother. And there is another side of the theology of the cross from Luther, which is this theology of consolation. And I think we often misread Luther as this polemical reformer and miss all these pastoral letters that he writes to people who've lost children. And so, and the theology of consolation goes back to Jean Gerson, who is Stupid's, Luther's teacher, loved a great deal. Luther didn't really like him. But I do think that there's seeds here of a theology of consolation that connects to the theology of the cross. So there's some sense that you never eliminate that consoling someone in suffering is just suffering. But there also is a way that you get pulled into this dynamic experience of giving and receiving ministry in this consolation. And maybe that could be described from a phenomenological point as always having a resonant quality, but maybe it's doing something bigger cosmically and God's involved in it. But that's where I mean, I think the way the interdisciplinary stuff was really helpful. And I thought that you did that well. And I personally would want to say those moments of consolation that a pastor cares for someone in the midst of dying is never not alienating, in the sense that they're never not dealing with real death and real suffering here. And that experience can't be reduced to resonance, but maybe there's a descriptive way of describing the human phenomenon of action as kind of a resonant quality. I don't know. That's the way I play with that idea.
I mean, just briefly, because I want to hear the other ideas, which are very interesting too. But there's an interesting, you could actually side with a lot of my sociological colleagues, really, right? But they claim that resonance is itself a kind of capitalist, almost capitalist product, right? I mean, they would say, well, yeah, it's this yearning. Capitalism lives from the idea that we find the source of what we really want to be and have true experiences of nature. Therefore, buy this cruise with guaranteed polar light and so on, right? And if you take, for Adorno, for example, would really say, if you try to formulate the good in a bad society, in a wrong society, you only formulate the good of the bad and not the really good, right? And it seems like what you're saying too. And of course, and I don't want to defend it at all costs, right? But I try to see how far you get, right? And for me, this is why I always think it's very important. I'm not sure whether maybe I misunderstood you now, but for me, resonance is not consolation or just consolation. It always has this transgressive and transcending element, right? Opening up the door to something beyond what I expected and what I wanted, right? So this is why I think you can reconcile my conception of resonance with your maybe your idea of something beyond alienation and resonance.
That's interesting. Just as you were talking, you could think about a kind of re-description of resonance in terms of an old-fashioned theology of desire, for example.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
And that kind of account could be liable to the sort of reduction that your critics think,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
We always want something. Now we just want resonance. Okay.
Yes,
fine,
okay.
Okay. But this point you made at the end would seem important to me theologically, that there's what we want and there's that which finds us, and those two things are Christianly thinking, I would want to say, typically disjunctive, right? Right.
Yes.
Just like we don't get what we deserve, that's called grace. We also don't get what we want because we don't properly know what we want, right? Or rather, what we should want, right?
Yeah, but this
And that's the place where I guess the kind of the theological language of judgment and redemption does work for me anyway in kind of complexifying that. I like the idea that there's a kind of unexpected transformation that follows. That sounds to me like a kind of form which one might be able to fill with something like this kind of disjunctive content. Yeah.